I'm Kylie Lee Baker, the author of The Scarlet Alchemist, a dark historical fantasy about necromancy in ancient China.
Kylie Lee Baker is the Japanese, Chinese, and Irish-American author of The Scarlet Alchemist. She was raised in Boston and is a lover of the horror genre. Her latest book will keep you on the edge of your seat by introducing you to a form of magic that can make people come back from the dead. Hi, I'm Gemma, and welcome to the red carpet. Kylie's third young adult novel was just released, and she's joining us here today to talk about it. Hi, Kylie. I'm so excited to have you here with us today.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Of course. Your book, The Scarlet Alchemist, features a girl with the power to do the impossible, and she gets caught up in a political game. I was hooked by her story. But to start at the beginning, can you describe the story for our audience?
Yeah, so it's a dark young adult historical fantasy. It takes place in an alternate version of Tang Dynasty China, where alchemists have created this elixir of eternal life, but only the rich can afford it. So this poor orphaned girl with necromancy powers in southern China has the dream of becoming a royal alchemist, where she goes to the capital and gets a little bit too involved in the crown prince's political problems.
So very exciting. Like you mentioned, your book is set in a reimagined China and features a very famous historical figure. How did you come up with this idea?
So a lot of it was inspired by my love of Full Metal Alchemist, the anime that I watched when I was a kid. And so I really wanted to take that, but put a twist on it in a way that was relevant to my own heritage, since I'm part Chinese. So this is sort of my take on that sort of alchemy genre.
Oh, that's so exciting. I said exciting twice. I also love Full Metal Alchemist. I think a lot of our audience can also agree, like it was a great show. So to see it reimagined, but featuring women in power is also such an amazing concept. Your main character, Zilan, is biracial, and people in the book use that as an excuse to treat her as inferior. Why did you choose to write her in that way?
So I always want to write about biracial characters whenever possible. It's really important to me as a biracial woman to have that sort of representation. And so through this book, I just really wanted to show how a lot of people like me and other minorities often feel like we have to justify our right to exist in certain spaces. And then people will use our identity as the reason why we got as far as we did, when it's really that we had to work really hard just to get in the door in the first place.
I think representation is the perfect word for this, because that's one of the reasons why we're here. We want to spread just more awareness that people with multiple lineages do exist, as yourself. One of Zilan's abilities includes resurrecting the dead. I thought that was such an interesting power to give her. How does this play into the book?
So Zilan runs a very illegal necromancy business. So she raises the dead for other people to raise money for her family, who is struggling with their own shop, which ends up being a very morally questionable thing to do, because she knows there is a cost to every kind of alchemy she does, but she doesn't know what the cost of these resurrections really is. And so she decides to just not think about it for a while.
What a great way to I feel like we can all relate. We just want to push things off to the side. It's a tomorrow problem.
Yeah.
In your book, the wealthy literally consume gold in order to prolong their lives, which is kind of a shocking concept. Can you tell us more about this?
Yeah, so it's actually based on a throwaway line in one of my previous books, where someone talks about the rich literally eating gold for breakfast. And I thought that would be really funny if I actually did that in another book. But it's really just a metaphor for very wealthy people taking a lot of things for granted and not caring who they hurt in the process of obtaining all of their wealth.
Yeah, sounds familiar. In addition to becoming a royal alchemist, she also accidentally becomes a royal concubine for the prince. Can you give us some details about the romance in this book?
Yeah, so it's really exciting because the main character is very clueless. I've only written edgy, dark, cool love interests in the past. So this time I wanted a guy who totally didn't have a clue. It's like that meme from Arrested Development of, oh, it's only a banana. How much could it cost? $10. Like he really cannot relate to a working class girl at all, which I think makes a very fun dynamic.
I also thought he was really sweet, which is such a difference from seeing all these like alpha bad boy romance types. So it was very refreshing to meet him. One of the things I adore about Zalan is her determination to keep fighting for her family, even when she thinks she's lost them. What is your favorite thing about her?
I really love that she's working class and that it's not something she feels like she has to overcome. It's something that gives her a lot of advantages because she has practical skills and she's proud to come from where she does. It's not, the goal is not just wealth, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. She was a very strong female character that when I was reading your book, I just adored her so much just because of her strength. Even though she comes from this background and having people look down on her, especially for her skills, her determination to keep going, just to keep fighting for her family, like it really touched me.
Thank you.
I heard you lived in Seoul for some time. As we are a K-pop station, can you tell us some of your favorite Korean songs?
Oh my gosh, I love BTS. I have a BTS calendar right there off frame. My favorite songs are probably Moon, Magic Shop, and Microcosmos.
Excellent choices.
Yeah.
I'm also curious if you have any interesting experience you can tell us from your time in Seoul.
Oh gosh, there's things I want to talk about on TV. Really, just a lot of my time there was eating all the Korean food I possibly could. And I miss that very much.
I would love to experience eating Korean food in Seoul. We have a lot of Korean food here, but I don't know how authentic it is. Your new book, The Scarlet Alchemist, was just released this fall in 2023. Can you share a memorable line from the book with us?
Yeah, so one line I really like is, alchemists need to break themselves into pieces. They want to rebuild the world around them so desperately that they would give their blood, body, or soul, but people in power cannot fathom breaking a world that already bows to them. Because it's really about how alchemy is a reflection of privilege and social change in this world.
I think that's a very powerful line.
Thank you.
We got a pretty good overview of your book so far, and now I'd like to go more in depth about the characters and themes. We mentioned before that you're a person of mixed lineage, as is Zalan. How has your own background influenced your writing?
So I can say that a lot of what Zalan experiences in this book is drawn from my own personal experiences of feeling like I have to justify my right to exist in certain spaces. And that's happened in both of my careers, both in publishing, and I also work in libraries as my day job. And both are not particularly diverse fields. So oftentimes I felt that people doubt my abilities and attribute my success to being a minority, when in fact I had to work twice as hard just to get in the door, which is something that Zalan also experiences in the book. I also put in a lot of minor details throughout the book of the little ways that race influences the way that people perceive her. Like, she's taller than most Chinese women, her hair is lighter, her feet are bigger, all sorts of little things that I've experienced in my life. And there's also this scene where someone measures her like she's some sort of animal for their museum. And that's something that me and I think a lot of other mixed race people experience, this kind of objectification by people of all races, like we're this exotic, rare breed rather than actual people. But I will say that my goal with this book was really to show a biracial character going on an adventure as opposed to a book about being biracial, which is very much what my debut duology was about. That was just one big metaphor for accepting yourself as a biracial person. But in The Scarlet Alchemist, what it really means is just that because she lives in a version of the real world, of course, her race comes up at some points in conversation, and some people have a problem with it as well, just because race impacts everything we do, inevitably, but it's not a central conflict in this book.
Thank you for sharing that, especially since it came from yourself and your own experiences as well. Zalan has been adopted into her aunt's family after her parents' passing, and she views her cousins as her own siblings. The trio's strong resolve to support their parents is a driving force in this book. What did this relationship mean to you?
So family is something I love to write about in books. Family is just so important to me. I'm very close with my family. I actually don't have siblings, though. So for some reason, I always write about siblings, even though I don't have any. So this is what I imagine siblings to be like, just a lot of making fun of each other and annoying each other to death. But, at the end of the day, also willing to die or to kill someone for each other. So I always, in my books, have some sort of element of like romance and family, and then family ends up being the most important one for some reason.
I thought that their relationship was portrayed realistically, even if you are an only child. I thought it was very accurate. I have a brother. We annoy each other to death. So I think it worked.
Great.
One thing that makes Zilan's character so interesting is her determination, which leads her to make some morally questionable decisions. Why did you choose to make your main character like this?
I love writing morally gray characters. I just think they're so much more interesting. And in this case, it was really fun to do it in a way that I thought was subtle. A lot of people tell me she's actually very unlikable. And I thought, I didn't think she was that bad. Oh no, what does that say about me? But the way it starts at the beginning is that she's selfish in a way, but only for her family. Like, she thinks charity and helping other people is something that only rich people should have to do because she's got enough on her plate. But I think about, and I think that is what drives a lot of her more morally questionable decisions. Like, she'll cross certain lines if it helps her family. But I do think a lot about some things that the author John Green said. I'm a big fan of John Green. And one thing he said was that a lot of people say, I'll give money to charity when I make more money. But what they find later is that you're never making enough money to feel like you have enough to give away. Like, you will never have enough. So, whenever possible, it's good to just start now. And that's sort of what happens to Zilan, is that as she comes into more power, she realizes it's everyone's responsibility to help. And that's how I think she starts to cross from more like chaotic neutral to chaotic good.
I actually love that she was, like the word that you used was morally gray.
Yeah.
She's not your standard protagonist that is, all good. She starts off with somewhere to grow into. So that was one of the things that stuck out to me about her, even though she was morally questionable, raising the dead for money. The fact that she was doing this for her family, like, I saw the strength in her. So that's what made me love her. This book takes place in an alternate Tang Dynasty China and is ruled by China's only female empress, Wu Zetian. We know her from history as being an ambitious and ruthless woman who clawed her way to the top. Why did you choose her for such a pivotal role in the book?
She's such a fascinating character to me. I think she just makes the perfect villain in some ways, just because the part about Wu Zetian that I find really interesting is that we don't actually know for certain how much of what she did is actually true, because obviously the sources describing her as just killing everyone in her path are very biased, because a lot of people surely had a huge problem with a female emperor back then. So, we'll always have to guess at what was actually real. But even just imagining what she might have done, I think she's just such this unparalleled figure in Chinese history, because she had so much ambition in a time when it was very difficult for women to do anything. And I think that's why she's so fascinating.
Yeah, it's so easy to vilify women, but like, she is such ambitious. Like, we love ambitious people, we stand ambitious women. And the fact that she was able to reach so high from starting from so low, similar to Zilan, I think she was a very fascinating villain for me to read about. Death is obviously a large theme in the book. In fact, we meet the Crown Prince because of his own fears of death. I know you love horror movies and Halloween, and your first duology also centers around death. Can you tell me why death is such a focus in your books?
I mean, honestly, I'm just a very morbid person. I think what interests me is more the cultural practices around death, more so than death itself. Like, I love learning about different conceptions of the afterlife across cultures, different burial practices and rituals. Like, I thought about being a mortician for a while, but I don't like customer service jobs, so that was the main reason I wouldn't do it. Not the dead people, but the living people. And I think maybe it's just hard for me to conceptualize death. I actually wrote a story in Uncanny Magazine earlier this year where this main character is so unable to fathom that her life could ever end, just because, of course, to each of us, our lives are so complex. The idea of it just not existing anymore is unfathomable. We can't imagine it. And so she actually convinces herself that she's immortal because she just can't deal with that reality. And I mean, I obviously don't think that I'm immortal, but I think similarly about death. And I think maybe that's why I write about it so much, because it's such a big mystery that I can't even figure out, but I try in my writing.
It's a way to try to conquer death by exploring what's going to happen after. It may not be the end, like similar to like the Egyptians.
Yeah.
I'm curious about how you portrayed the wealthy. It felt like a social commentary. Can you talk more on that?
Oh, it is absolutely a social commentary. I am continuously shocked by the things that the ultra wealthy will do for money and still be able to sleep at night. Like, the people who, justify the astronomical cost of insulin because they want to pay for their third summer homes. And meanwhile, people are literally dying because they can't afford it. And there's people like that in my book, but also in real life, and so there's a lot of people who just have a lot of blood on their hands, much like the Empress in this book, and they just choose not to think about it. So this is a very eat the rich kind of book.
That's exactly the term I was thinking of. No offense, but like eat the rich.
Yeah.
Your book is gory and gritty and rather violent. What were your intentions about writing a darker young adult fantasy?
I mean, really, it would be, I think that I write very dark themes because it's what I would have liked when I was a teenager. I was a very cynical teenager. Like, you could not have paid me enough to pick up a rom-com when I was a kid. And I think a lot of kids are cynical these days, just with the world being the way that it is. It's a very tumultuous time to be a kid. So really, it's just what interests me and what I wish there was more of, or that I could find more of when I was younger.
I thought your book wasn't overly violent, but I do appreciate how much detail was involved in the book.
Thanks.
Your book is in the dark fantasy genre, but you also brought some levity to the story. For example, one character is fascinated with ducks. Can you talk more about these lighter moments in an otherwise serious and suspenseful book?
Yeah, so that's something I do. A lot of people comment that my books are very dark, but also very light at certain points. And that's something I do intentionally because of anime, because I grew up watching anime. I'm often thinking about Black Butler when I write, just because that's one of my favorite shows. And it has some of the most dark, awful, heartbreaking moments in one scene, and then the next scene over, they're just telling jokes and doing that thing where your soul leaves your body in this cartoony wisp. And I really loved the depth on both ends of the spectrum, and so that's something I try really hard to also do in my own writing.
I think it brings a good balance when you have such dark themes, but you can also bring the human side of it, because we're still trying to live our lives even if bad things are happening. Alongside your mixed ancestry, you have also lived in many places around the world. How do all these varied experiences influence your identity?
I hope that they've made me very open-minded to lots of different experiences. I think also as a mixed race woman, it's been very interesting for me to live in different parts of the world. Like, for instance, when I lived in Korea, I very much felt like I was perceived as being a white woman most of the time, even though that was not how I felt in the places I have lived in America. So I think in terms of writing about being biracial, especially with these characters who live in, compared to the United States, much more racially homogenous countries, it helps me imagine more of their experiences. So obviously living in Korea is not the same as living in Japan or China, but just in terms of giving me different perspectives, because the mixed race experience is not the same everywhere in the world.
Has it influenced your writing?
I think it's made me interested in writing about different mythologies in different places. Like, for instance, I'm trying right now to write a contemporary fantasy that has a little bit to do with Korean mythology. I don't want it to be a Korean fantasy because I'm not Korean, so I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that. But I'd like to touch on it in my next book and talk about a little bit about the experience of living as a foreigner in Korea. So I think just getting to live and experience different cultures makes me more curious about them.
Oh, that's wonderful. Can't wait to read it.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. It hasn't sold yet. So.
Well, fingers crossed.
Thanks.
You've watched a lot of horror movies. What's the scariest thing you've ever seen?
I gotta be honest, not much scares me. Probably when I was a kid and I watched The Grudge, that haunted me for a long time. But I think I sort of topped out on how scared I can be then, because not much really scares me anymore, to be honest, except for spiders.
Oh.
Those really scare me.
Oh, no. Things with too many legs, too many eyes. Can't do it. I understand why.
Yeah.
I know there's going to be a sequel as well. Is there anything you can tell us about it?
Just that it's very exciting because I took a lot of creative risks with it. Like there's some POV switching, like not by chapter, but through magic, like going into the perspectives of different emperors of China. So I'm very excited about it.
Oh, I can't wait to read it. So where can we find your books for purchase?
Anywhere books are sold. Basically, they'll sign them if you order them from Border Square Books.
Yay. And where can we find you on social media?
I'm at KylieLeeBaker.com, or you can find me at Kylie Lee Baker on Instagram or TikTok.
My guest today has been Kylie Lee Baker with her book, The Scarlet Alchemist. You can pick it up wherever books are sold. To see more interviews from brilliant writers in the Asian book sphere, take a look at our other interviews here on the red carpet. I'm Gemma for the K-pop-TV Broadcast Entertainment Network, and I'll see you next time.